Welcome to HR Voices. A podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hello and welcome to our next edition of the HR Voices podcast. As you can tell, me, Mary's partner in crime, as she's been referring to me for the last few weeks, is back on the team. Had a few interludes and a few things to attend to. As we always say with HR Independence, you know, we are run by independents for independents, and sometimes a few things need our attention. So I am back on the podcast, so that's great to be back. Thank you very much. And what we're going to do today actually is do a bit of a roundup. We've had our mini series, which has been really varied, actually, lots and lots of different topics. And of course, we've had some really interesting stuff happen. So we've got a new government. So that's going to sort of shake things up a bit. So what Mary and I thought we would do is just sort of go through some of our insights, learnings and follow-ups to the most recent mini series. And we've had quite a few speakers, haven't we, Mary, really?
Yeah, we absolutely have. We started this particular mini series by speaking to Claire Vance-Taylor from Boyce, who gave us an employment law update, a really interesting update so far for the year. So what had come into effect since the beginning of 2024, which covered a number of things, mainly family-friendly policies that the government had introduced, including the right to request for flexible working from day one, and also carers leave that was introduced for carers who care for dependents. Again, a day one right for carers. But what's interesting, Charlotte, as you just said, the fact that since then we've had a change in government, and the Labour Works Plan also promises to bring in even more employment law changes and legislation. So a really busy time, it seems, is going to be for HR consultants, employment lawyers, and employers generally. So something to watch out, and I'm sure we'll touch on that slightly later. The next person we spoke to was Magnus Kodas from Occupational Health Assessment, and Magnus helped us to demystify occupational health assessment. And I think the key highlight is the fact that occupational health is a tool when used effectively to help employees perform better in the workplace, and also to improve the employee-employer relationship, not to be used effectively as a stick to beat employees up, but it's a really powerful tool to help manage that relationship better.
But what was quite interesting about it was actually it was really about less is more. So I think we'll talk about that in more detail. Saying less is more, and we'll go into more detail. But I found that quite interesting, because I think we can wrap ourselves in knots a little bit trying to ask too many questions. So I really enjoyed listening to that one.
Absolutely. He just really brought it down to, look, there are 5 key questions that you should ask your occupational health assessor when you're contacting them. So I think as HR professionals, it's something to really take a note of, because if you ask those 5 key questions, then invariably you get all the answers that you need within that report to help you and your employee and the clients that you may be supporting as well. The next one was also creating a supportive environment for for pregnant women in the workplace. And that was, our guest was Lisa Thompson from Mountain HR. And Lisa touched using her personal experience. I think both you and I could relate to that conversation very much, in terms of when you are pregnant in the workplace, and the sort of supports that you'd expect to have from your employer, and the sort of versus the kind of support you really get from your employer. I think the good thing is that probably since you and I had our babies, employment law has improved and for the better. And so women are a lot more protected. But you and I also know that there are still challenges, isn't it?
Yeah,
in
it's
the
still out
workplace
there.
for women. So it's something that we still need to keep working on, keep advising, keep training and creating the awareness for the workplace to be a better, much, much better workplace for women. And the next one was speaking to Elma O'Reilly from Parallel London, who touches on when HR meets creativity. And that was focusing on how you could use people's solutions to bridge gaps in innovation. So how HR and people professionals could effectively support creative entrepreneurs and business owners or businesses generally when we are working with them. And I think last but not the least, we spoke to Paula Melbourne of the Maple Leaf Coach on personal and professional growth. Again, a very interesting discussion around personal and professional development, how powerful it can be if individuals take control of their own personal and professional development rather than sitting back and expecting their managers or the employers to do that for them. So it has been an incredibly interesting mini series, and we've spoken to some wonderful people who have all shared their insights. And so this is an opportunity for you and I to talk about our key learning points and the key takeaways from these mini series, and also share from where we've had various experiences, etc., as well on these topics.
Yeah, it's great. And I think we are always so very lucky that we have so many guests that are just really happy and able to share their knowledge and insights and give us their time, which we do really appreciate, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely.
So let's start with, because let's start with the employment law then. I mean, what we've had is a catch up in April from the pandemic. Basically nothing sort of went through Parliament because of the pandemic, understandably. That's all had a bit of a catch up and has all gone whizzing through Parliament and had approval and sort of landed in April. And in theory, there's still a couple of more bits to come in October, sort of September, and probably April the following year in terms of sexual harassment and neonatal leave and things like that. But is that all going to be up in the air now? I mean, where are we now with this change of government? I mean, they've got some big plans in the Labour Party to, again, enhance and change HR legislation. So are we back on the roller coaster and in for a bumpy few months?
I think that is really interesting, because if you look at some of the changes or the proposed changes in the Labour's manifesto or the New Deal for working people, effectively, I do think most of them are miles away from some of the expected legislation that we were hoping will come in from October. Yes, with the new government, how the law, the legislation ends up being, or the bills end up being, might be different. What is your view?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've got the right to request, regular working hours, predictable working hours. That's clearly going to align to the idea of, reducing 0-hour contracts. It's an interesting concept. I think there'll be a lot of comment from business around that. And I don't know how that's going to work for the sectors that need variable labour. I'm assuming that actually what we're going to end up with is more casual contracts with set sort of periods of working. But, still some businesses need flexible labour and variable workers. So we're going to have to work out how in practice we get around that.
I think that is true. When there's always changes or talk about changes in employment law, it creates, as you and I know, a bit of panic sometimes among employers, especially around costs. And being able to flex your workforce sometimes is really good for employers. However, we also know that there are some employers who can exploit workers. So it's also a good thing, I believe, where workers' rights are protected sometimes, but there ought to be a really good balance for businesses to be able to afford some of these measures and also to create employment opportunities.
So I'm wondering if that's going to be a bit like the holiday pay for part-year workers, whether it's going to, not land as well as hoped, be consulted on a lot, and then eventually be scaled back. I don't know. Be interesting to see how that really does pan out.
Absolutely. It will be interesting to see. So it's a watch this space, isn't it? We are watching keenly. And yeah, we'll absolutely, when I think the laws are passed, then we will get back on here, I'm sure, to talk about what it really means for the workforce and for employers generally, and how HR consultants might be able to support employers with the new legislations as they come in play. And I think one of the other things is the genuine living wage concept. And if you think about it from the point of view of the cost of living rising all the time, it's got to be a good thing, right?
It's got to be a good thing, but again, I suppose because we work in the SME market, the small and medium-sized business market, it's easy to see how that has a massive impact on small businesses and their costs. And of course, it pushes everything else up, doesn't it? Everything's relative.
But I think my favorite of all the proposed legislation is the right to switch off.
Yes, we could do some of that, couldn't we?
That is my absolute favorite because I'm pretty much aware, and I'm sure you are too, of sometimes the unreasonable expectation on employees to do work outside normal working hours, sometimes into very sort of unholy hours over the weekend and everything else. Yet, when that same employee is not able to do their full hours, their same employer would complain.
Mm. It's a really interesting topic, isn't it? Because if you think about what HRI does and how we support our members, we're all small business owners, working with other small business owners. And of course, we make a conscious choice, probably a poor one quite often, to work longer hours and to dip in and out at unsociable times because it suits our own flexibility and because we've got a lot of work and for various reasons. But actually, within the sort of employed model, there are still these expectations, and it's not your personal choice. There are these expectations that everybody is permanently switched on all the time, and that, a response is expected at any time of the day or night or holiday, or, and the further up into sort of more senior roles you go, I think the more that expectation is there. There definitely is not a switch off culture, is there?
No, but I think an analogy that we use quite a lot is around imagine your smartphone being in the red all the time or running out. What you normally do when you see that is most people these days go into a panic mode because, oh, I need a charger. I need to find a charger. When my phone switches off, then I would know what to do. And so if we don't believe our phones can run on the empty and we panic when our phones are in the red, we should think about ourselves in the same light, isn't that? Really sort of being able to, when do we allow ourselves to recharge? And you have a favorite phrase, Charlotte, around you can only be your best, you can only give your best service when you are your best self, isn't it?
Mm.
So if we think about our employees and we want them to service our customers and our clients and support the production of our products and delivering our services, we should really make sure that they do have the time to recharge, the downtime, so that they can be their best selves to give the best customer service we possibly can expect of that.
Yes, otherwise what we're doing is we're fueling future health issues, burnout, stress, sickness figures, retention, presenteeism. I mean, all those things that fall out of a tired, exhausted, overworked, and what they perceive to be underpaid workforce. So, it's not good for business, is it?
No, it's absolutely not good for business. So,
No.
yes, very exciting times ahead.
Yes, and of course, again, attempts to sort out the pay gap, the gender pay gap. So that's always welcome, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that is a big thing. Claire, who was our guest on the employment law update, actually wrote a really interesting LinkedIn article then around Christmas time, where I've forgotten exactly when, but it was definitely around the end of the year, where I think she stated that with the gender pay gaps, it's almost like asking most women to work something like 2 to 3 months a year for free.
Yeah, it's quite a scary statistic. It's one we've seen before, but yeah, I think it's from something like the middle of October, isn't it? I think the date up until Christmas, then in theory you work for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that needs addressing. And we all know that, I mean, most people work hard, but most women do work hard and juggle with a lot of responsibilities to do their work. So it will be good for that effort to be recognized.
Yeah, and again, something that's sort of in the Labour work plan, very topical and can resonate with a little bit at the moment, is the support for those sort of going through menopause.
Yes.
Yeah, another interesting topic, with hopefully some ideas to promote how to help women navigate that in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, so all good, really good proposed changes coming our way. And we will keep our listeners and our community updated. So that's good. I think we're Allfrey's legal partner has done a recent employment law webinar on the upcoming changes, what to expect. Again, a very good resource for people to listen to if they haven't listened to it already, but really good.
I mean, starting to see a lot of it come through, actually. A lot of the solicitor firms that we work with and employment law firms are pulling things together. So it's all useful stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so while we're sort of talking about sort of compliance and policy and things like that, let's just touch on what Lisa talked about in terms of supporting pregnant women and returners, maternity returners, and parent returners in the workplace. Obviously, that was a very interesting conversation. I mean, my children now are sort of 22 and 18, and so, it is a long time ago, but as we said, there's still a bit of a hang on, and there's still some sort of fairly shocking and poor practices out there that don't support women in the workplace, and still a perception of whether you should recruit a woman of childbearing age, and how they can be supported back into the workplace, and that they're probably going to have another one. So I think assumptions are still being made about women and their intentions and their plans and how it's all going to pan out, which is just a real shame, because actually it's an incredibly challenging, magical, life-changing time for all parents. And I thought it was quite nice, actually, that Lisa wasn't just talking about those that are pregnant. She was talking about, being a parent generally. I thought that was really nice. But it's challenging and it's tough juggling everything, isn't it?
I think it is challenging and it's tough. And one thing I would really want to say is for employers to understand that it's not just about women. It's about creating the right culture and the right support to be an employer of choice in a competitive market, which is really effectively a workers' market when it comes to recruiting and attracting top talent, it's very important for you to be able to show to your workforce, potential new workers coming to join you, that you really care about the people who work for you. And like you're saying, it's parental rights effectively, isn't it? Because invariably, whether it's the actual birth mother, the adopted parent, or the father or someone else, they all love the child and they all want to be cared for in a way that you're caring for that person. So they are watching very closely how you're treating your pregnant employees, how you're treating your adoptive parents, how you're treating parents returning back to work from family-friendly leaves, and how you probably not giving them the same promotional opportunities, how pay rise, when it gets to pay rise, you are kind of marginalizing them. And so the impact on the whole employee life cycle becomes very obvious to people who are watching closely. And actually, when I say, oh, my last employer, without mentioning my last employer's name, my connections may well know who my last employer was, or if they didn't. Or they sometimes need to look at your employee's LinkedIn profile, and they'll be able to find who the last employer was. So in a way, it's not even good publicity for your business. So your potential clients might see it, or your existing clients might see how you treat your employees as well. So it's really, I think, a topic that we all need to do the best we can to educate, to ensure that we get to a point where it's no longer an issue anymore.
It feels like it should be a no-brainer, but it's not, is it? It's still not. We're still not in that territory of it being a no-brainer to actually support working parents in the way. And actually, they have a lot to give, and they absolutely value support from an employer. I mean, we see that with the clients we work with. When you have clients that really are, rocking their parental roles and responsibilities, the employees are so pleased, engaged, valued, they appreciate it, and they give you so much more in terms of the psychological contract. So I think that's really interesting. And of course, what we have had is just that little bit of protection added in April with putting, returners through redundancy. And actually the protection goes beyond returning to sort of 18 months after the birth of the child, which is, I think, is really good. But, the corporate sector's loss is our gain, isn't it? Because actually, if you think about it from an independent practitioner perspective, what we actually end up is with an amazing professional cohort of practitioners in the HR and people sector who come out and start on their own and become our sort of great and engaging members, because they're done with the whole, sort of lack of flexible working, lack of support for parental policies, and they come out into private practice.
Yes, and I think, yes, the positive, their losses are gain is absolutely true. But it's also sad that should be the reason why people leave jobs that they really love and organizations that they absolutely have done everything they can to support. So sometimes, like you say, in the knock-on impact, apart from the psychological contract aspects of it, can also be a financial one, isn't it? If the person is able to prove that actually I'm being discriminated against due to my pregnancy or due to my request for family-friendly rights or whatever, then there can be a real issue there, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for anyone listening, if you haven't listened to Lisa's episode, do have a listen, because she's got some really good advice and tips on as a workplace and as a consultant trying to support workplaces, how to put good measures in place to really support those people, parents and returners.
Excellent. Then the next one to pick up is HR meets creativity with Elma on bridging innovation with people solutions. And with that, basically looking at how creative people, I think Elma's take on it is the fact that most creative people, creative entrepreneurs, they are ideas people. They're great with ideation, and they got an idea, they got a vision, they want to run with it. They really don't like the whole concept of red tape. So policies, you need to do it this way, that way. And parts, not everything, but parts of what we do as HR people is the much loved policies and procedures, which, okay, we need to do it this way, we need to do it that way, because that's the law and that's the thing. And actually, most creatives really don't like that. So how do you then work with them in such a way that you're able to support them, support what you're trying to do, at the same time ensuring that they remain compliant where necessary? And really, I think the take on it was taking your time to understand your clients and their businesses, their visions, and what you're trying to do, so that you can absolutely contribute to what they are trying to do in a way that resonates with them. And by doing that, you'll be able to come up with solutions that support them in the way that they are trying to run their business, and also whilst at the same time ensuring that they remain compliant where legally they're expected to.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you mentioned that understanding the business, because that's one of the things when I listened to this one, because it's one of the ones I couldn't attend. I sort of marked down on my notebook with lots of asterisks next to it. You've really got to understand the business that you're working in. The other thing I thought was quite interesting when she spoke about it was actually that there is a very big misconception around what HR is and does, because again, it comes back, if you think back, in terms of our HR backgrounds, to this idea of what HR is and what HR isn't. And we're not the internal police. We're not the policy legislation police. But, there's a fine line between having some guidance where everybody needs something around managing expectations, but actually creatives want to be free to be innovative, entrepreneurial, absolutely butt up against structure and sort of do their own thing. So there is a really fine line, and it's how we can develop and evolve the flexibility within the structure. So it sounds like it's quite difficult to do, because I think it is a fine line. But of course, what we find, again, going back to sort of our members and the people that we work with on a day-to-day basis, that is absolutely creativity, because they're entrepreneurial, they're creatives, they're looking to grow their businesses, they're looking to develop their services, they're looking for innovative ways to provide services to small businesses, to make it more efficient for small businesses. They want to bring, really good expertise. There's a lot going on in that whole creative versus HR field, isn't there?
Absolutely. And yes, HR consultants, independent HR and people professionals generally are solutions-oriented people. And understanding your clients and their businesses is key to running a successful HR consultancy. It's an absolute key to everything.
And what's a shame is that there's still, and Elma did touch on it, there's still this misconception that HR is not value adding. It's not a value adding or a money making, profit making part of the business, which is nonsense. But we're not in an organization that sells something or services. We're not directly revenue generating, and it's a shame, because actually the value that can be added through great HR practices and embracing things like creativity, innovation, communication, collaboration can absolutely affect the bottom line, can't it, positively?
It can do. And that is where it's important to remember that the H in HR is about humans.
Yeah.
And the R is the resources, right? So human resources. And if you think about it in a way that for most organizations I've come across, the biggest cost is salary. And it's about the people, it's about pay, what you pay them and stuff. So if you look after your people, if you look after their well-being, etc., and they are productive, a happy workforce is a productive workforce, right? And you go a step further to say a well workforce in terms of the mental, physical, psychological health, everything of your employees. If they are well, they are also going to be happy and productive, right?
Yeah.
So it's really a no-brainer, as you said earlier, not to look after your workforce, not to care about the people who work for you, not to value HR and what HR does for you. So the value that HR can bring to an organization in organizations who allow HR to add value is astronomical. And it adds straight to the bottom line.
Yeah, it does. But I think there's an element of sort of being fulfilled in your role as well, that sits with this, because you have to have that mindset shift from corporate to entrepreneurial and independent and small business. That's a definite mind shift. And if you think about what keeps you awake at night, which is something we talk about a lot, again, those things change when you are sort of working in a business as opposed to owning and running a business. So we have to understand and play to our strengths and make sure that we're doing what we feel we need to do for our business in the right way. So I think creativity has so many different strands to it, and there's so many options to develop creativity in a supported way within employment, but also to be really creative within a small business.
Yes, and talk about creativity. I found a discussion with Magnus really amazing around occupational health, and also the fact that actually occupational health, as we know, a lot of HR professionals will advise employers a lot of the time when we're dealing with a lot of employee relations issues, get an occupational health input or advice on this. The whole discussions around demystifying occupational health, I found very interesting from the point of view of actually, you and I know a lot of the time when these reports then land on HR's inbox or on our desk, you look at it and you think, well, actually, this is useless. It doesn't tell me anything about what I'm asking for. And the 5 questions that Magnus went through, that ask these 5 questions. So if you haven't listened to his episode, I would really recommend that you go and listen to it. It's episode 24 in the HR Voices podcast. Do go and listen to it. Really talks about the fact that when the report lands on your desk, if there's anything you don't understand, contact the person, the occupational health specialist, and ask the questions. And then the second aspect of it is just make sure that in the very first instance, you are asking the right questions to get the right responses to what you need to help you in that decision-making process. So yeah, I found that discussion very interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I learned from that actually, which I didn't already know. And one of them is not the fact that actually, we all know we need to ask questions, but I do think we do wrap ourselves up in asking quite complicated, specific questions when actually the questions he gave us were, let's just leave it quite open, and less is definitely a bit more, because then you give the occupational health provider or assessor time to tell you what they think rather than answer your very specific questions that drill down to what it is you think you're trying to find out. And I think we have to be really careful to make sure that the occupational health report that comes out is not just a regurgitation of the conversations you've already had with the employee. And actually, if you ask too many specific questions, that's what it means it can be. But the thing that I thought was really interesting, which I wasn't fully aware of, was the fact that an occupational health provider is not obliged to change anything unless it's a factual inaccuracy. So if an employee doesn't, reads the report and isn't particularly happy with it, yes, they can change a factual inaccuracy, which makes sense. But actually, if they're not happy with how something has been presented, if that is the occupational health advisor's professional opinion or view, medical view, that's their professional opinion or medical view. So I thought that was really interesting. And obviously the fact that occupational health providers are quite happy and prepared to push back on employees that withdraw consent at the last minute. So potentially, an employer could pay money for an occupational health assessment and the employee could withdraw their consent, which means it doesn't get sent. But they will, under their duty of care, tell the employee that actually that means that some decisions might be made without any medical opinion or medical information. So I thought that was quite helpful.
Yes, and I think that is pretty much what is in most policies, isn't it, when it comes to informing your employees about the fact that you may ask for an occupational health view, a specialist view on a medical, on a during a capability process or in a medical issue and stuff like that. You absolutely have to be, it's down to the employee at the end of the day, because if they don't give their consent, then there's very little HR or occupational health specialist can do. However, if you refuse to give your consent, what that means is that HR, your employer, may then make decisions based on not having enough information. And actually, if it gets to tribunal and they can demonstrate that they wanted to get an occupational health specialist view, but you did not give your consent, it may not go in your favor as an employee anyway. So it's very important that you think carefully when it comes to these things. If you're an employee whose employer or HR department is asking you for your consent for occupational health assessment, and as Charlotte just said, if you agree to go through the process and you get to the final stage with the occupational health assessment and decide to review the report before it gets released to your employer and you withdraw your consent, then in the same vein, decisions might be made without having the right information.
I think sometimes as HR professionals, we sort of feel that we're on different sides to occupational health, whereas actually what Magnus reassured us was that we're all on the same team here and that the goal really is to support the individual and empower them and enable them to do their role. One of the things I thought was quite interesting, he said, was that mindful triggers should be consistently applied to reduce discrimination. And he gave a couple of examples of how, somebody suffering with a migraine, how they sort of report that and how it is or isn't taken through a process. So that was quite interesting too. But actually, it should be a very open and transparent process. And, there shouldn't be any surprises for an employee in that, which I do talk to clients a lot about, because quite often they'll tick the have they got performance issues box and they'll tick it as a yes. And they don't necessarily mean there's something very specifically wrong with their performance. It might just be that they're not performing because they're not turning up, or they may have a view that there's an issue with their performance, but they've not actually spoken to the employee about it before. And so then you suddenly end up in a conflict situation because the employee sees that for the first time, and it's not going to be filtered by the occupational health provider. They're not going to know whether you've spoken to them about their performance before or not until they're sitting down in front of the employee. So what you don't want is those flashpoints that then turn a supportive, transparent process into conflict resolution and management.
Absolutely. And then if we think about a very important point you've highlighted on, Charlotte, that when it comes to a lot of employee relations processes and management issues, you sit down, as you and I know, in an investigation or something, and then you make a statement and the employee's face goes like that because they absolutely had no clue what you are talking about. No one's bothered to raise it with them. No one's bothered to highlight it or to try to address it with them. So the first time they hear about it might be when they sat in front of or on the phone to an occupational health specialist, or when they're in a room with an individual undertaking an investigation, or when they are in the middle of something. So it should really never be the case, should it? With good management and best management practices, there shouldn't be any surprises when it comes to some of these issues, should there?
Yeah, no, it's right. And it's the surprises that then turn things into a different process altogether. One of the things I thought was quite interesting, he said, was about questions not to ask, so questions to avoid. And that was, and I have put this in reports, so I need to take some learnings from this. How long do you think this condition might be present? And actually what, Magnus was highlighting was that that's very difficult to predict. And, like us, they haven't got a crystal ball. And some of it will depend on how the employee heals, how they are treated, how quickly the treatment is, how they are supported in the workplace, and whether there is a supportive environment for them to return to. So actually there's lots and lots of variables on that response, and actually we're better just to scale back to say, is it work related, is it a disability, and let the occupational health provider provide you with the detail of what they believe the condition to be. So I thought that was good as well, and definitely very useful.
Absolutely useful. So yeah, very great and interesting discussions. And also the other thing is the professional and personal growth discussions with Paula.
Yeah, big smile on my face with this one because this really resonated with me.
What was your take on it?
Oh my goodness me. Well, I always like to think that I have a growth mindset, but I was listening to some of what she was talking about, and I was thinking that actually, yeah, I do have that sort of stubbornness to sort of hold myself back sometimes. There was definitely some bits and pieces in there that really resonated. And I mean, we did a whole mini series on resilience. So we absolutely know that personal resilience and professional resilience go hand in hand. But yeah, I thought this was a great listen. I'm just turning my page on my book here. I made lots and lots of notes on that one because it was one of the ones I couldn't do. But yeah, the 70-20-10 thing, that's really interesting. So 70% of your learning should be, professional growth should be led by you and is sort of learning on the job. And, 20% potentially led by others. And then 10% supported by an organisation or some other structure. So, I mean, for us, in the independent sector, that would be memberships to things like HR independence. That's where potentially I get my supported organisational learning from. So yes, really good. And I mean, you've heard me say it probably, I dread to think how many times, but every day is a learning day. And we do absolutely in the HR field, as careers, roles, companies, legislation, and all these things develop and people develop and change through generations. And, as we move through in age, there's always something to learn. And we've never ever seen it, and I don't think we ever will have seen it all.
No, and I think the fact that if you get to a stage where you think you know it all, that is the stage that you probably developed a limiting mindset.
Yeah.
We always, personally, I know that there's always something new to learn. Even if you do things every single day, there is that possibility that there is absolutely something that you don't know about what you do every single day. So learning is very important. Continuous learning is important. Personal and professional development is quite important. even in the context of where you are in your role, where you want to get to is quite important. And even if you're in a role that you think, yeah, for me, this is it, I just enjoy doing this and I enjoy doing what I'm doing, there's always something sort of across that laterally or horizontally that you can actually consider in terms of what you can do and how you can improve as a person and professionally as well.
Yeah, and the whole comfort zone thing, that's quite good, isn't it? So in Paula's view and expertise, you are most successful when you are most uncomfortable from your comfort zone. So that's a big leap to take, but that's reassuring to know, isn't it? So yeah.
It's absolutely is. I mean, when I'm coaching people, one of the things is growth happens when you step out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
It's sometimes when you step into your unknown, that's when all the things that you probably know you should do, but you're not doing because you are so unsure of yourself, or the big what if questions. What if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if, and it stops you? You use that to convince yourself not to step out of your comfort zone and to challenge yourself a bit. So growth definitely, totally agree, happens when you step out of your comfort zone.
Yes, and we seem to learn more from the failures than we do from the wins, which is, it's interesting, but a shame, but, it's absolutely right. And I thought I quite liked her bridge analogy. And again, going back to this idea of a continuum and building momentum. So actually, lots of little steps can get you across that bridge. It doesn't have to be a whiz across in one go. You can take baby steps, just keep moving. And that's really good advice, and something I hadn't heard too much about before, but I'm going to do a bit of research on, have a look at, so I understand it a bit more, is the Ikigai. So that's not something I've come across.
I love that. I really love that, the Japanese concept. I really love that. Really worth looking into.
Yeah, so that's on my list to learn more.
It's a really good concept. So what you do effectively sums up what you do and why you do it, isn't it? And when you are happier doing what you do. And it's that when you find that sweet spot in the middle and for the reason why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think, again, in terms of going back to my notes and say, because I had to listen to this one, not be part of it, big stars and asterisks on your growth sits with you, own it and take responsibility.
Absolutely. If I had £1 for every time an employee came to me and said, oh, can I have my appraisal files? This is days way before HR systems were all on software and stuff. And even when it's on software, people still go, oh, where can I find my appraisal form? And it's typically an hour to their performance appraisal meeting with their manager, or if you're lucky, a day to. That's when people are looking. And that makes the whole thing obsolete, because it's meant to be a working document. It's meant to be a guidance document that you use throughout the entire year to help your performance, not a checklist exercise which gets filed and never looked at until an hour or half an hour before your meeting to remind yourself what was said the last time.
Quick check whether you did everything. Yeah, but that's why we encourage regular constructive feedback, routine conversations, one-to-ones, welfare checks. It doesn't have to be this big beast of a process that just happens once a year that nobody's interested in. Actually, you can have meaningful, and again, Paula talked about that. She talked about, good constructive feedback. And again, transparency, that word transparency comes up a lot, doesn't it, in what we talk about. But yeah, so take control of your professional and your personal growth. It's not down to somebody else. You need to drive it yourself. So I thought that was really good.
Right.
Well, so that's another mini series done and dusted. what are we going to do next?
I think next in this, we always have interesting lineup of speakers coming to speak to us. And our next set of series will be equally amazing. We'll be looking at various aspects, including discussing employee benefits and what is really important to a successful employer-employee relationship. We'll probably be looking at reward and various aspects as well. So that there are, stay tuned. We've got some really interesting next set of series episodes coming your way. And so please stay tuned.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you for chatting that through with me today. I'm sorry I missed some of our sessions, but it's great to listen to them actually and catch up. So hopefully some of our listeners will do the same if they've missed them. So thank you once again for joining us on the HR Voices podcast. If you'd love to be one of our amazing guests and subject matter experts, then please do get in touch at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. We're always looking for guests, and we will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.
Great. See you soon. Take care. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.